streaming start, and then there we go. Okay, now we're going live. Mm. Okay, we're live. Hello, everyone. Today I got Jon Kenworthy, candidate for congressional seat in 3rd District. This has been hello, everyone. It's been a few Kenworthy weeks for congressional seat since I had said something. It's been a little while, but we've been working on it. Just like I got other people coming as well. It's just we're all working on everybody else's schedule. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thanks for inviting me on. Pleasure to be here. My name is Jon Kenworthy, and I am running for Indiana's 3rd Congressional District for the United States House of Representatives. I grew up in Fort Wayne. If you're familiar with the district, that's the biggest city around. And little history about me: I have a wife and 3 kids. Been married for 18 years now. I served in the Army as a cavalry scout. Did 2 tours to Iraq. It's called Stop Loss, and also unfortunately saw 30 of my brothers fall while I was there, and more since then, to the invisible wounds of war, which is the main thing that started getting me interested in politics, wanting to make sure that our troops had the best equipment possible, the best intel possible, and that they were used as a last resort, and diplomacy was fully exhausted before we ever commit our young sons and daughters to go and fight, and also to take care of veterans when they got home. More recently, obviously I've been out for a little while, as you can tell by the beard, but more recently worked for Senator Dan Coates as a staffer, and also Senator Mike Braun as a staffer, and there I handled military, veterans, Department of Homeland Security, NASA, State Department. So a lot of the things, when you think about the government, things that they're actually supposed to do versus a lot of the things they get involved in where they have no business being involved in. And again, I'm just excited to be on here and see where the discussion leads. It's always nice to have more of a discussion instead of a quick interview, because I think it gives folks an opportunity to see the real me more than can be captured in just maybe 2 minutes on another station. Quick interview, because I think it gives folks an opportunity
do you have a speakers on?
to see the real me more than can be captured in just maybe 2 minutes.
Oh, sorry. Do you have your speakers on?
Quick interview. Headphones.
Headphones? I don't know why there's an echo there. I'm not sure where I'm getting. Maybe it's on my side. Do you have your speakers on?
Headphones.
It's weird. I don't know why there's an echo there. I'm not sure where. Because I muted my mic and then. Weird. Oh, I don't know. So, you ran last time when there was a bunch of candidates, and then decided to run this time as well. What made you decide to run again? You ran last time when there was a bunch of candidates.
Sure. So the main thing was that after seeing the campaign promises of last election cycle, and then sort of tracking what's been going on in the world, not just at the leadership level, but also from my opponent, Marlin, and what he'd been doing. And I just felt like he hadn't been living up to the promises that we saw. Back then, we were talking about $36 trillion debt, and now we're closing in on $40 trillion. And the debt was a big topic. On the topic of abortion, there was a lot of talk about, what could we do to stop abortion at the national level, or at least start to try and tackle that, whether it's the pain-capable ban or the 16-week ban, something like that to at least start pushing the needle, especially when we had the House, the Senate, and the Congress. And I saw that Marlin hadn't co-sponsored any of those bills, and seemed to be going lockstep with what the president had said, which he said that he didn't want to do anything on the national level. And for me personally, that was a big issue, because I think if you're against abortion and you believe that it's murder, then you should be willing to take that stand. You shouldn't be okay with Ohio having a different law than Michigan or Indiana, and folks just crossing the border. Separately, I saw a lot of foreign travel. I saw trips to UAE and to Israel and to Syria, and there was about, from the filings, and this is all available online, you can go check the official government filings, you don't have to take my word for anything that I say, but from those filings, he was out of the country for about 29 days last year. It's, nearly a month that he's gone, when he's not back here meeting with constituents or going to businesses in the area and trying to support the district. And that really rubbed me the wrong way, but it rubbed me the wrong way for also a personal reason, because one of those trips was to Syria, where he met with the new president of Syria. And a lot of you may not be up to speed on that. It's a small country on the other side of the world, and they're not currently involved in a lot of the stuff that's taken center stage right now. But that president, he is a terrorist that came from Saudi Arabia and fought with Al-Qaeda in Iraq against American soldiers at a time when I was there. He was arrested and spent about 6 years in military prison before he was finally released. And he was arrested in 2006. And once he was released, he went to Syria and started a new jihad until he finally overthrew the government there. And I understand sometimes as a country, we have to have diplomacy with people who used to be our adversaries or enemies. However, the place for that should be at the presidency level, or the Secretary of State, or an ambassador. It didn't make a lot of sense why our congressman, who's not on foreign affairs or intel or military committees, anything like that, he's on budget and finance. It didn't make any sense why our congressman from the 3rd District was over there. And then when I found out who paid for these trips, and found out it was foreign alliance super PACs, it made me even more aggrieved. Because I'll be honest, seeing something like that, as a veteran that fought over there, and having lost so much personally, and seeing the loss of my brothers in arms and sisters in arms, it's almost like spitting in the face of every global war on terrorism veteran, or every Gold Star family. And I couldn't believe he was doing it. And at that point, I said, if nobody jumps in this race, I'm going to step up and give people an opportunity, give them an alternative, somebody that's conservative, but that's going to do the job and take more care of it. So those were the big ones, but maybe even bigger for the voters out there, which is also very important to me. I just had a personal connection to that last one, but more important to the voters out there, and I think we might break down this a little bit more, is him being an original co-sponsor on the Dignidad Act, which is an immigration bill that sets up not a path to citizenship, but this quasi-legal status. It gives them anybody that came here illegally a way to stay in the country and have a sort of status. And that's a problem because they're still going to be here and they can stay indefinitely as long as they pay a small penalty. They'll still be here having more kids that are going to go on our system and be citizens then. And also, it's an amnesty for all the businesses that have been cheating and breaking the law and hiring these people. And that's not fair for, first, our labor force that has had their wages depressed, but also for other businesses that have taken the time to invest in either their labor force or in technology. This sort of crony capitalism is what's gotten us here. And sort of all that together led me to say, if nobody else is going to do it, I'm going to step up. I still had a lot of resources from last time. You see my shirt and stuff, and you've probably seen some signs out. Um, and so I felt like it was a calling, and it was the right thing to do to give people that alternative. Yeah, and I feel like I understand sometimes there's some behind the scenes thinking on some of this stuff, but at the same time, when you have mixed messaging that comes out to the American public, that's almost more than anything, except for maybe economic downturn, is what causes a loss in faith towards the goals we're supposedly trying to achieve. So when you see something like we're at war with Iran and we're bombing them, but then we ease their sanctions at the same time, it doesn't meet the threshold of normal, good old Hoosier common sense, right? Why would you be giving money back to somebody that we're fighting? Maybe afterwards to rebuild after the goals are accomplished, that might make sense. But normal folks don't understand that. And if there is some sort of bigger strategy, it needs to come along real quickly. And I think we're past the point of just giving latitude, and a lot of folks are. Um, and that's not the only time that we've seen this. We were also giving money to the Palestinians right after the October 7th attacks when we were supporting Israel. And not to dive too deep into that, but if we're going to pick a side to be on a conflict, we need to be there and do it consistently, because if not, we're only drawing out the conflict and drawing out the suffering, and that's not okay.
Yeah. So just so everyone knows, this has been amateur hour. I was in trying to work on the audio stuff, so they could hear you, but some of the times they couldn't hear me because I was trying to figure out that echo. But I figured it out. Uh, so the question was, I was basically I asked him about or we were talking about how frustrating it is for our government to consistently side with people who are our enemy and rearm them, like whether it's Afghanistan. I mean, ISIS. We created ISIS as well. Iran, actually, our CIA helped create the Iran that everyone says funds terror and all that stuff. Now, people forget that like it was partly our doing that brought that about. So like almost all of our enemies, or like at least our main enemies, we've created or armed. Uh, I mean, like even in Afghanistan, we had like there's people who were like we've armed and made our allies, and they fought against us when we were over there at some point. Um, so it's like it's just like I'm just tired of the wars. Like I'm this Iran war. Like I'm not in support of it at all because it's not necessary. Um, and this is me personally. I just don't think it's necessary because uh, I mean, it wasn't until I think the only person really winning out of this is Israel, because they get to do what they want to do, like in Jordan and all that stuff, or not Jordan. Is it Jordan? Um, what's Jordan's the place where they're bombing.
Lebanon.
Lebanon, that's what it is. In Lebanon, yeah, because they went into Lebanon. Sorry, uh, like, and then they continue. They violate the ceasefire. Few times, so, but enough of my
It's
ramblings.
not it's not just that though. It's also uh, the defense contractors, and we have a lot of good defense contractors right here in the third district that are very supportive. But at the higher levels of some of those companies, you can you've we've seen a history of it, right? We've seen a history of it, especially going back to the global war on terrorism, Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah,
Um, some of the biggest offenders are names that you've probably heard of in the past, connected with like Dick Cheney, KBR, and Halliburton. Uh, but there's others in the mix too, and the people that work at those factories, they're very patriotic, and they produce some of the best products in the world to help our service members win and have that tactical advantage. But at the same time, when the highest levels of their board are pushing decisions and lobbying for decisions uh, focused on the money and not on the mission, there's always going to be an incongruency there with what's best for the American people and for our military. And I think that's also a big part of why some of these things get drawn out, or at least how they're proceeded on. And in this war, and also in Iraq, unlike some other wars, we're seeing that more with oil as well, and how that comes into play.
yeah. I mean, them shutting down the strait, like it's funny how, and that's what's funny about America is that we like to throw our weight around, and we think often that, like, if we just tell someone to do something, they're gonna do it, and then, the threats, and then this time Iran was just kind of like, and I believe it was started off by Israel's bombing. So, and that's what started. I think they were the first to bomb, and then and I'm not blaming Israel. I'm just stating the facts because when it first happened, I went and looked it up, and Israel was the first to start bombing. So, um, but and then they shut down the strait, which. Uh, uh, but I mean, even what is his name? Is Ken or Kent? Is it Kent? His terrorist
Oh,
director,
Joe Kent,
Joe
yeah.
Kent. Yeah. Even he was talking about it was Israel's the primary reason why negotiations uh, with them have failed, um, which is
And obviously, I wasn't in Congress at the time that this happened. I don't have privy to the top secret briefings. There very well could be a legitimate reason for this, but that hasn't been communicated to the American public, and I'm not even sure if most of Congress has taken the time to go to those briefings as they're voting on these things, because the votes seem to be very much down party lines, which is sometimes unusual when it comes to foreign affairs. Other places, it's always going to be party lines, right? But
yeah.
for foreign affairs, there's often a little bit more wiggle room, and only seeing one or two on each side break with the parties is a little bit surprising. Uh, I think that also what you said about Joe Kent and Israel and stuff, wherever we figure out that comes down 20, 40 years from now when things get unclassified or whatever, that's one thing. But that doesn't excuse, just like the war I fought in Iraq, that doesn't excuse how we're conducting the war. And we've sort of unfortunately backed ourselves into a corner where none of the choices are good, and that's what scares me the most.
Well,
If we walk away right now, they get everything. They still keep everything, and we've hurt the economy of the world, but especially here in Northeast Indiana for farmers, because a lot of fertilizer comes through there as well, very badly for at least the next 6 months, probably the next couple of years. And if you go the other way, and you know, like I said, I don't have the top secret information. I don't know, but if that's justified, and you go the other way, the Iranians are so entrenched and have shifted to the new form of warfare that we started seeing in Ukraine with all these drones and massive amounts of low cost munitions. Uh, if we go the other way, then that means either boots on the ground, or even worse, you know, the thought of nuclear warfare.
Yeah.
And
Well,
none of those options are going to be good for the country, especially in the short term, but even in the long term.
and my thing
It scares me.
is that when we talk about like voting and stuff, like Congress didn't vote on whether we went to war. Like this war was not, and people, so people are out there. They're like, well, the War Powers Act and all this stuff, but the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. All you gotta do is read the founders and see what privileges what the branches can actually do, and then what they actually said about the presidential war powers from the people who actually were presidents, like Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Madison. All of them, and people like to say that Jefferson was the Barbary Pirates, but they haven't actually. You haven't went and read the documents. You don't till you go and read what they actually said and what they did with Congress. Like you'll see that all of them followed this doctrine of only Congress can move us from peace to war. Now, and then people are like, well, good luck with the secrecy or whatever, right? But when Congress makes that vote, they outline the powers that the president has. So if you needed secrecy and the president needed to be able to act on things quickly, in that when they vote on it, they can actually put that in there. The president can. We give the president authority to do these top secret operations without having to tell Congress right away, and they can come back and notify us after the after it's done due to secrecy or whatever. Like people don't actually realize how that stuff works because they've never read about it, they've never went back, and like this is one of those things. Like we saw, we've seen a relatively few people, and the exact warning that the founders said. They say the executive branch is more likely to throw us into wars, and through my lifetime, I've definitely seen that where, based on the whim of a president, and they put boots on the ground or bomb a country and then get us involved without anyone else's without Congress's say, and Congress, like, they're kind of cowards to me because they don't fight for their power. Like, the War Powers Act was supposed to be something that reigns in but that was a horrible. I don't know who read that and was like, oh yeah, this will show the president. Like, we'll only let him do it for 90 days, or whatever. But but yeah, like it just it's crazy to me. And this will actually shift us into our another thing that we want to talk about is money and politics. Like it's crazy because the thing about Israel, and if you look at their lobby here in the United States and how much money, like President Trump himself has taken millions of dollars from AIPAC, and then not just Trump, Biden did as well. Obama, when I looked it up, it doesn't look like he took like money directly from AIPAC, but he did take money from donors of AIPAC. But like to me, and it's crazy how like we're doing all these things that they want to do, and these people are pushing Israel hardcore, like Lindsey Graham and others. Like, how do you? I know it just makes me angry when I think about it. But how do you feel about pretty much our politicians being bribed by other countries?
Oh, I think it's disgusting. That's why I've said that I'm not going to take any money from any of those groups, and also focus on any fundraising that I do within the district, because it's not just about other countries. It's also about economics, and what's best for the third district isn't always going to be what's best for Silicon Valley or the finance sector in New York. So
Yeah.
I think it's important to stay as close to the people that you're going to represent as possible. I think that we need some serious election reform, um, campaign finance reform. I would like to see something to get rid of Citizens United. I would like to see something to get rid of Buckley, which is just a backdoor way to do the same thing by letting a candidate fund their campaign with their own personal wealth, which sounds reasonable until you realize that that's why a lot of these folks will go and be on a big board of some major conglomerate, and they'll rake in a ton of money only to turn around and use that to, quote, self-fund themselves. And then they're going to be beholden to that company that they worked for and gave them the money to do that in the first place. And there's other things too. I think we're starting to see some states try and fight back. I believe it was Montana that is working on some bills to adjust the quote rights that corporations have to try and start fighting against it. But it's going to be a long haul to get back to what we should always have tried to stay at, which is one person, one vote. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, but I'm going to be there, getting on the bills that try and accomplish that.
Yeah. So I mean, gotta try something else. So like, what would you? So your opponent, like, what would you say is the biggest difference between you two? That when people vote for you, they're gonna it sets you two apart, I guess. I don't know if that was a clear question. That's
No,
kind of a
it is. I think for me the problem is there's not like a biggest one, and trying to consolidate all the differences are very hard. I guess maybe the biggest sort of general idea would be accountability. Um, and what does that mean? It means showing up in the district, voting the way the district wants and for what's best for the district, um, not taking money from foreign line PACs or billionaires from out of state, things like that. Um, showing up for votes. This past year, Marlon's done a little bit better, but if you look at his whole record for missed votes across the four and a half now terms that he is in, and I say that because he got appointed through special election, not because he's halfway through this term. Uh, just to be clear. But if you look back, there's been times where he's missed 16% of the votes in certain quarters. Um, I mean, that's the main job, right? To vote on and craft legislation. And
yeah.
if you're not doing that, you're not being accountable to the people. And I will be there doing that. When
Do
I
you
worked
think
for, go ahead.
do you think he misses, like, do you think it's strategical? Like maybe um there are things that he doesn't want to be on record, voting yay or nay on, so he just misses it so that technically you can't say that he did either. You know what I mean?
Uh, I don't know what's in his heart, um, but my suspicion, based on the time periods that a lot of the missed votes line up with, happen to be when he's campaigning for something, trying to reach for a higher office or something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't begrudge anybody that, if you've been doing a good job and you want to try and step up, Jim Banks did, for example, go for it. But you're still in the position that you have, and you need to be doing that job first. You have signed up, you have taken the oath, and you need to follow through. Um, and that's accountability as well. As far as me, the difference you can see with me, I worked for Senator Coates and Senator Braun, and when I first started, my first job was in DC for Senator Coates. It was for 2 years, getting my foot in the door, trying to understand the process, learning from the experts that he had on staff. But when I came on for Senator Braun, uh, I was the expert. I had gotten all that under my belt, and I asked him specifically if I could work from the state and only go out there when it was needed, when they were voting on something that my policy portfolio covered. Um, and that allowed me to go to every VA hospital in the state, most of the vet centers in the state, uh, most of the National Guard and Reserve centers. The couple, we only have one main active duty base in the state. I take that back too. We have Coast Guard in Michigan City too, but it allowed me to go around to those places. It allowed me to visit with farmers and local communities. And some of the legislation that I wrote for Senator Braun came out of those meetings because it was ideas and problems that people had brought up to me. And it's not always legislation either, right? Sometimes it's casework, helping an individual. But sometimes seeing a pattern in casework can lead you towards fixing a systemic problem, especially when we talk about things like the VA. So I had 3 bills that I wrote for him that addressed problems with the VA that were substantive to try and help veterans, and they were all signed into law. They were bipartisan. We did the work, we did the background, and got them passed. But also smaller things like Blackford County um, was trying to get a retention pond built. They had some issues, and it was going to be, I believe, like a $12 million project. And one of their elected officials met me on a trip down there, and he brought up to me a program which I had heard about in the past, but I didn't know it was still ongoing, where local communities can request help from the National Guard engineer units to help with projects like that.
Yeah.
And I dug into it and looked into it, and they were ready to file for it's sort of like a grant, but to file for this program. But it was sort of getting stuck at the adjutant general's office and in the Pentagon, and so made a couple of phone calls and got that pushed through because it's a conservative way to use taxpayer dollars. A community gets something that they need to help them out, and the engineering unit gets to do training, which is much better than just sending them to Camp Atterbury or Crane Naval Station or Fort Knox to move dirt back and forth, right?
Yeah.
A much better use of taxpayer dollars and sort of a win-win on multiple fronts. So just things like that, but you don't find out about things like that if you're not engaged with people. And I think that also shows, again, in accountability, writing legislation, proposing legislation, at least trying, if you look at how many bills Marlon has proposed over the course of his career. And
Yeah.
it's only 41 bills. Now compare that to Jim Banks at the same time before he ran for Senate. I believe it was something like 128 bills. And then looking at the success of those bills, right? The only one, if you go to congress.gov, the only one that became law was and you can filter by what he sponsored and what was signed into law. And the only one was a post office renaming, and it was for a soldier that had died. He was actually a soldier in my company in Iraq, and that was a nice thing to do. But where's all the other substantive stuff that's going to push the country in the right direction? And that's why I feel accountability in bigger terms, covering all these things, missed votes, coming back to the district, writing legislation, doing the casework. We just haven't seen that out of them. And I want to stand up and be there to do that for the district.
Okay. I mean that's good. Like involved in the community. I do often think that a lot of times people leave and kind of forget about their their districts where they come from, and they don't vote and a lot like. Uh, but that's I don't want to get into that again. I'll just. Uh,
Well, also like I said, there's just so many good ideas out there. Like I think I'm a pretty bright guy, but I don't have a monopoly on the good ideas. And these people that you interact with from the district bring up lots of good ideas or showcase places where there's some pain points. Um, and especially when it comes to saving money for the government.
yeah.
I won't tell you how many meetings I've been in where they've said, we spend this much on something. And one of them, I'll give you an example. Naval Station in Indiana spends almost $1.5 million a year mowing the grass. Um,
That's some expensive grass.
and it's a big base, but it's not a training base. And so the question is, could some of that grass be replaced with a ground cover that doesn't need as much maintenance? I mean,
Yeah.
we have Purdue right here with a great ag program. I'm sure they'd be extra excited to do a study on it to find the best Indiana ground cover. And then where could you take that from there? Where else do we mow all the time? Every interstate, right in the median. Uh,
Yeah.
and there's lots of places and you see out in like California where they have water problems, they've gone to either desert scape or to succulents, uh, more plants that are resilient and don't need a lot of money. And yeah, I know everybody's going to laugh and say, federal debt, we're talking about trillions of dollars. What's $1 million here or there? Well, we didn't get here $1 trillion at a time. We got here a couple million here, a couple billion there in this budget or that budget. And aside from doing something big to address Social Security and Medicare, some of these mandatory programs, which is unlikely considering what the makeup of Congress usually is, uh, that's where we can have some real change, is by looking at those discretionary programs and making those little cuts with scalpel one by one until they add up to something bigger. Because Congress might say, you'll walk through the halls of Congress and they'll laugh and say something like that's budget dust. But I say that's exactly the problem we have, that they have that mindset. And that's not something that I agree with and want to fight against.
Well, let me push back a little bit because, uh, like, because at the rate they're spending money, like that does not seem significant at all. Because this has been one of my, even with Doge, like they actually with Doge, that even with a lot of the cuts that they did, it was still like, and you could tell that there was no real on either side real will to really cut these programs. But like that however much money you might save, that million out of that $1 million, it's gone every day, like over like hundreds of times, over, and it's increasing. Not, I mean, and then we've just started quantitative easing again, like uh, it doesn't that doesn't those types of savings. We're kind of past that point of we're sinking. It's almost like someone would say it's like you got a bucket. Let's say you got a battleship that's sinking, and you got one man with the bucket trying to throw the water back out in the ocean as it's so. Uh,
No, I agree, and I brought that example up more because it's sort of funny, but it's also something that people can recognize. It's hard to picture in your mind just what $1 trillion is. Um, even $1 billion. It's beyond comprehension at some points. But I have bigger examples too. The littoral combat ship, which the Navy has already started retiring. They said that this program does not meet our mission and the fights of the future. It is not good to go, and they started retiring them after only about 12 years, I believe. That total program cost is going to be $100 billion, and they are still spending billions in R&D on a program for a ship that's going to be retired. They have one of the missions for that ship was supposed to be minesweepers, and they didn't even take them over to Iran where they could have been used. So
Yeah.
what does that tell you? There are some places where there's some more significant wins, but I do agree. We need to try and fight for some of those bigger intrinsic wins on mandatory spending and on the whole sort of wish list that DOD gets that comes from every senator and every congressman that are additions to what's already normally a huge defense budget that comes from the White House, just because they want a new factory in their district or their state, and I can identify with that. You want to be your state or district to be successful and get contracts and bring money into the communities. However, if it's at the consequence of hurting the nation as a whole, that's not really appropriate in my view. And that's where we've gotten to.
Yeah, it's like it's a black hole. That's what it feels like, because it seems to just be ever expanding. Because tax dollars, like, don't get me wrong, start on the income tax, all that stuff, but that's not the majority of what pays for what we do. The majority of what pays for what we do, we make out of thin air, like from the Fed. So, it's funny. It's just, I don't know. It's and it's scary that most people don't realize that, because they talk about the social programs, and then every few years, or when the budget comes up, they're fighting over stuff, but it's not about your tax dollars. I mean, they're gonna waste your tax dollars regardless, but they're also gonna waste your savings, because by them printing money and all that stuff and the inflation, it's actually a hidden tax on your savings. It devalues whatever you have in the bank. So, which is it's immoral. Like, so how do you?
I 100% agree. I mean, it is a hidden tax, and it's insidious, and it's not just the printing money; it's also the manipulation of global trade, which we're seeing a lot with this war. And I think people are starting to wake up a little bit, because especially this war is specifically, they're seeing it in oil and gas prices, things that they see every day. And they're going to start to see it in groceries, especially as the fertilizer hits the farmers. I mean, right now we're in that season where they need that. So I think this is going to wake some people up, sort of like it did in the 70s when we had stagflation. But the question is, how long is it going to take for enough people to wake up and be angry enough about it to go out and vote and make a difference?
As well as the gas, like the impact on diesel, like you're gonna see, because everything in the nation is transported by diesel, whether it's trains or semi trucks, box trucks. Like, the majority of your food and stuff is transported by using diesel. And so, like, when you see them prices going up to $5, like, if it goes any higher, like, you're looking, a lot of these companies can't, I mean, some of them won't survive that. And then because they're not, I mean, other companies aren't going to be able to, aren't going to want to pay that, because the trucker has to or the company has to charge so they can pay for fuel, and the driver, like, I mean, you're not working for free. Like, you can love your nation all you want, but if you're going homeless, it don't really matter. But well, we kind of talked about the fuel thing. Do you have anything to say about how the war is affecting the fuel and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, 20% goes through that straight, and I've seen different numbers. We do get some of that here in the U.S. directly. I think it's probably safe to say in between 5 and 8%. And I'm not talking about just gasoline. We were also talking about LNG and other fuels as well.
Yeah.
But so at that point, it will impact us. But also, we have to remember, fuel is a global commodity. So even if we tried our best, we could not output enough to supply the demand that we have here. So we have to import fuel. Uh, Maybe with a couple of years of preparation and extra drilling and uncapping drills that were on standby and things like that, we could get to that point. But we're talking about years down the road, right?
Yeah.
Which isn't going to help anytime soon. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is how long the delay is for those ships to, even if the strait was open tomorrow, those ships only move at about 10, 12 miles an hour. That's why it takes them 2 or 3 months to get to the US. And even if they're not going to the US, if they're going to China or Malaysia, or even, you'd say, well, I don't care about them, even if you say some of our allies, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and they're starting to pay, in some cases up to I saw the highest one I saw was $290 a barrel. And you say, well, I haven't seen that in the futures market, because that's all they focus on when they report on this is the futures market. They hardly ever report on the actual spot price when somebody's taking it off the ship and paying that bill.
Yeah.
And there's a huge mismatch, and it's going to cause a problem, and it's going to crash very quickly.
Yeah.
And that has me worried. And like you mentioned, diesel, it's a little bit different beast, because we have some levers that the governors can pull. We have gas tax holiday right now, but that works differently for diesel.
Yeah.
And commercial stuff like you mentioned, logistics.
Yeah.
But also just the amount of damage that has been done to the oil fields, to the refineries, to the storage. It's not just like flipping the switch back on. It's going to take, in some places, I think Qatar said their LNG refineries, they estimated 4 years to get them fully back online. And they lost something like 20 or 30% of their capacity because of drone strikes. And then when you take that into account with other things going on across the world, we had a refinery explosion down in Texas a couple of weeks ago. Ukraine is still attacking refineries in Russia. There was a monsoon or a hurricane, not a hurricane. I forget what they call them in the southern hemisphere. My mind's going blank, but a hurricane in Australia that took one offline for a while. So, it's sort of this confluence of typhoon. There you go. Yep, that's right. This confluence of all these things at once that the market hasn't caught up to, and I think that's where I'm talking about manipulation. But I'm very worried. And I'll be honest, I have a motorcycle, and I've been riding it a bit more because it gets about 80 miles to the gallon. I might look silly on it because I'm a little bit bigger than when I bought it, but I don't care. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do, right?
That's right. Like, people are like, people's first instinct, when you see the dude on the moped, people laugh at him, but like, I often think to myself, like, he's actually winning, because wherever he's going, it ain't costing him much. So, like, I don't even hate. Like, I'm just like, I get it. You got me convinced. I'm almost on that. Like, let me get a moped. Forget what I look like. I need my wallet to be okay. But, let's see. Oh, I wanted to touch on a little bit. Are you okay for time?
Yep, I'm good still.
Okay. A little bit about your own, like your religious belief and your own personal, like, is there a certain denomination, or like, what is it that you ascribe to?
Sure. So, I personally am Lutheran. We go to Concordia Lutheran Church here in Fort Wayne. That's the faith that I was brought up in and baptized in. But I will say I have how do I want to put this? I will say that I've had experience going to other churches as well. especially when I was in my younger years and sort of exploring what I really believed. I did spend quite a bit of time going to a Mennonite church and going to some Baptist churches. And so I have a feeling for, some of the different views about Christianity, but ultimately did decide that my beliefs pushed me towards going back towards Lutheran as the denomination. But that said, I think Christian overall, we're going to have infighting about little things, but I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, this is actually a good question because it's actually a hot topic right now. So, as a Christian, what are your views on Israel? Not necessarily. I mean, in the sense of like people of God, how should we support them? Like what in the relation of the church too. I know that's kind of a loaded question. That's a lot, but you know, I just feel
trying to get me in trouble.
No,
it's important. It's important to be able to tackle these tough subjects and say where you believe. Now, I will say, I haven't completely formed an opinion on this, and I'm still open to discussion and possibly changing my mind. But from the research that I have done and from what I had learned in the past about this topic, I and where I believe at least the LCMS Lutheran Church Missouri Synod stands is more in line with the Catholic interpretation that the nation state of Israel is not the same as the promised people from the Old Testament. Going more specifically into it, Jesus came to fulfill the covenant, and then now, if you wanted to try and make a argument that there's still a state of Israel, it would be all Christians that have believed in the Messiah that came, not whatever Israel as a state is, because it's not just the Jewish religion, right? It's not, even though there's a lot of talk about, is it a theocracy? Isn't it? In theory, it's supposed to be somewhat secular and the protection of Jerusalem and things like that. And also, I think just like within Christianity, there are deep splits in the Jewish religion between the path forward, whether Zionist or not. So I don't like the categorization of lumping everybody together because they live in one country or have the same religion, at least on the outside. As a Lutheran, I believe very differently from Catholics on some things, which is very different from other groups. The Amish, for example, if we want to go to some of the further out fringes, and I think that's what's great about America, though, right? We have that freedom of religion, and it is so important. And I think if you're okay, I'd like to touch on that idea a little bit more specifically, because I think that's been brought up a lot. Seeing Secretary of Defense talking about this being a holy war and bringing things like that, and that's really disturbing to me. That is both as a Christian, but also as an American.
It's kind of what you would expect a Muslim to say, like a jihadist, is that, and they can make the claim like, yeah, Islam is always at war with the world, because until the world is completely, Islam, there's like it's always a jihad. But like, as the United States, like we're not jihadists, so we shouldn't be looking to go battle, Muslims, or make it a religious thing. Like if it's a economic thing or something else, like all right. But if there was a caliphate and they were like, starting to conquer countries, then it'd be like, yeah. Then I'd be like, all right, I see what you're saying. But when just over the Iran thing, because and then be like, oh, it's a religious war. Like it just has a bad taste. Like, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and talking about the end times and things like that. I don't believe that's, the founders made it pretty clear about freedom of religion, and even as a Christian, I believe that the best way to spread God's love is to show people through your faith and through your works, and let them observe it, and that's the best way to bring people to Jesus, in my opinion. And how can you do that if you have the government forcing one specific type of religion or one sect of religion down your throat? And we've been seeing some crazy stuff come out of different leaders within the administration, which raises some eyebrows.
Yeah. I mean,
I think there's yes, the nation was founded on sort of Christian ideals, but there's a big difference between "thou shalt not murder" and "you must believe in my call to war." Right?
yeah, yeah, and I mean that is, I mean, when it comes to like the basic, that's why the founders, when they write like it's not a Christian nation, and that that the in the First Amendment, that the state, it protects the church from the state, and there is no, I mean, in the sense it's a separation of church and federal state, but there is no, in the sense that they can't choose, like, for instance, they can't be like, oh, well, the nation is Lutheran now, so like you have to adhere to Lutheran principles. You know what I mean? Like the church, and if you don't, then you're liable to go to jail, or you can't have land. Or, it can't do that. But the founders
Exactly.
were,
What happens when it gets flipped around? And
yeah,
as a student of history, even if it gets flipped to a more atheistic view, look at Nazi Germany, communist Russia, China. They sort of let a few mainstream religions sort of exist
yeah.
for propaganda purposes, but they subjugate and persecute
Well,
others.
we've lived under
And
that in the
so
United States for quite some
yeah,
time now, where they limit. I mean, using the exact same thing, separation of church and state, where you can't have certain things in school. Like I remember I had a Bible, and they told me I couldn't have it because of that. Like I mean, there's a lot of different things where, like, but the federal government is allowed to encourage like Christian, or it can encourage stuff, but and you can pray in Congress, you can do all of this stuff. Like it never prohibits like living out your faith while you're in there, or asking to pray, and they did a lot of that stuff. Even printing Bibles, the government has done. So, but like you're right, like with this thing where they. Uh, like for instance, like they say you gotta, if you don't support Israel, then like you're not really a Christian, or uh what's the other oh, I can't
talking
think of
about
it.
the Pope,
Huh?
if you're not against the Pope anymore, you're not a good
Yeah,
American. You're a traitor.
like this, it doesn't make any like it doesn't make any rhyme or reason, like it doesn't make any sense. And then like if you notice, and then once they do things like reading the Bible from, I forget whether from different places, from the White House and stuff, for like they're reading through the whole Bible. I'm like, that's dumb, because like to me it's dumb. It's like I think it's just one of those things that they do to, like, it's a it's not dumb because it's the Bible. It's dumb because it's being done as a distraction, pretty much. Like,
There's a difference between professing your faith and you know being courageous in that, and trying to use it to score political points. And I
yeah,
think most folks see that distinction, but every once in a while it'll get over on some people.
yeah.
Um,
Like, you want to show me you're a Christian? Like the administration holds like biblical values. Like, do finish releasing the Epstein files, and then prosecute some people for doing that evil stuff. Because if you read, I know that people don't really read the Old Testament that much, but if you do, you'll see that um, one of the things that God expects from especially like governments and leadership is that you are just and you're not you don't help the evil person. Uh, uh, what's that? Impartial. You're impartial when you judge. Like it doesn't matter whether someone's poor or rich or whatever. If they break the law or whatever, then you have to give out just judgments, regardless of their standing. And what we've seen with the Epstein files is that uh, they're allowing their wealth and their status and like that they've gained in society to let them get out of jail free card, pretty much, and that is unjust. So like to me to sit there and read the Bible to me and talk about like this is a Christian administration or whatever, we support Jesus, and then out of the other side of his mouth talk about how uh, you know like it's a Democrat hoax, or there's no more files and you lie, and you don't go.
Or to say it's a waste of time and a waste of money, all these hearings. Okay, I'm sorry, we had hearings on steroids in baseball in Congress. We had hearings on people saying naughty words in rock and roll songs in the 80s, and free speech. I mean, all this silly stuff that we have hearings on, something this serious, it deserves a hearing, even if you completely believe that nothing happened. If you believe Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein didn't do anything wrong, and all these girls are lying, still we need to have that investigation, prove it.
Yeah.
It needs to be proven, right?
Yep, it's got to be looked into. But sorry, so like Lutheran, um, let's see. Do you have any events coming up like
I'll be in LaGrange for a GOP event on the 30th, and then I will be doing some live streams all next week. I haven't locked down the time on those. But it's like some Facebook lives and stuff like that, giving people opportunity to ask questions. Right now we're trying to figure out the campaign strategy for last minute spending, and who's going to put signs up at which polling locations, and all that kind of fun stuff, all the stuff that's not so sexy, right?
yeah, the footwork, the leg work, the stuff. Yeah. um oh, let's see, is there anything else? Don't remember. Was there anything else that we said we were gonna cover?
We could dive a little deeper in on immigration if you want.
Yeah, definitely.
So I have a unique perspective on this because my wife is an immigrant. I met her while I was serving in the Army. I was stationed over in Germany, and we did all the paperwork to get her green card and come in the right way, and it cost us about $4,000 or $5,000 getting doctors' health screenings and getting all the paperwork translated, and just the fee itself as well.
Yeah.
To apply, and also the travel to go to those, because a lot of them weren't available in Fort Wayne, so we'd have to go down to Indy or go to Chicago and stuff like that. And I know many people that come in the legal way spend much more money because they hire a lawyer to help them. Thankfully, I had just gotten out of the Army, or off active duty at least, and was pretty familiar with doing government paperwork, and we got through it. I didn't have to hire a lawyer on top of it, but still very pricey. And this was back in 2008, right? It's more now. And so when we talk about tackling immigration, we need a full plan. And obviously, we talked earlier about Marlin's plan with the Dignidad Act, which is 100% not the right way to go. But what would a good plan look like? Because I do believe that immigration is important. We do need workers, and we do have a history of being a compassionate nation. If there's a country that's in war, and the history of being a melting pot, uh, and I think that's not something we should turn our backs on, but we need to do things properly, right? We need to follow the law. We don't need people skipping the line. We don't need people sneaking in from countries that we're fighting, for sure. And so, how do we do that? We heard last election cycle a lot about the wall. Well, the wall's still not done, and I'm not 100% going to sit here and say it needs to be a physical wall, but the end goal of having near zero uh, entries, as long as we can achieve that somehow, whether it's a physical wall or drones and people in helicopters following up when they find somebody, whatever, uh, it needs to be secured, and it's still not 100% secured.
Yeah.
We need to change the laws about how much the penalty is for coming here illegally, because a lot of people think you just automatically get deported. You don't.
Yeah.
And the last time I looked, I believe it's about a $50 civil fine for coming across the border illegally. And then obviously there's other ramifications about trying to come in legally later, or the 10-year waiting period and stuff like that. But that's really not enough. It should just be, if you're here illegally, you need to be sent back. Then we have to talk about, where are these people coming from? It's not just across the Mexican border. It's also across the Canadian border. And most years, about 40 to 50% come on a plane, and they're just a visa overstay. They come here with a legitimate visa or a passport and overstay. And when you think, oh, that's 40 or 50%, that's millions of people. So they're not just all coming across the southern border. That's a more important place to focus on, because we're also dealing with drug trafficking and sex trafficking there more than people coming in on a commercial flight. But it can't be ignored if we're serious about taking care of this problem. And then dealing with Mexico, we heard so many times Mexico's going to pay for the border. I think they should, the border wall. I think they should. And how we should do it? We should cut their water off, because they've been breaking the treaty and stealing water from us. We have 2 treaties with them in place, and they've been stealing tens of thousands of gallons from the Rio Grande and some of the other rivers in the Colorado.
Land.
Yeah. but I mean, if we're serious, let's do it. Let's start cutting it off. Because that's not okay. Let's stop sending them foreign aid.
Yeah.
When they're running a trade surplus with us. You're doing foreign aid, then you're doing trade surplus, and then we do a tariff, and then we don't. Just stop. Let's have a congruent policy that sticks together and works towards a common goal, and not make little exceptions here or there for all this stuff, because that's what makes this stuff take forever. So, but for immigration, we got to deal with all that stuff, and realistically, we have to deal with the fact that there's a logistics nightmare of deporting that many people, and some people legitimately may not have a country to go back to, and I don't have a perfect answer on that, but it's a conversation that we need to have. But any conversation like that can't be had until we take care of all these other problems first.
Yeah.
You have to have a solid baseline to start some sort of negotiation like that.
Yeah, and you can't have welfare programs either if you're going to have an open border. You can't have both. You can. Now, if we're going to do that, then we have to if we're going to open the border, we have to get rid of our welfare program, because then and the healthcare stuff, because then it's not a drain on our healthcare and stuff. But
it always will be, because they'll still have to go to schools. They'll still have to have houses. places to stay.
Well, yeah, but our government's not paying for it. They'll have to work and get that stuff themselves. Which I'm not. It's still, again, that's a job that should have went to an American. But like but I mean that's just what when I look
And
at
like I said,
this.
we need workers, and I think it should be easier to come here. It shouldn't cost like we had to pay $4,000 or $5,000, and we should expand some of these visa programs to have legal status. I would prefer
Yeah.
that we expand immigration to have more people come here legally, work
Dude,
hard,
I don't
and
think we need
assimilate.
workers. I think a lot of people have actually like bowed out of like, and this is just from working around and seeing like a lot of people have bowed out of just working. I mean, when some of them have the option of like the government programs, some of them just quit altogether. Like they just they're out in the street taking money from on the corners and stuff. Not not prostitution, but the other one, the
Yeah.
jangling a
So
cup.
I will say, look at some of the smaller towns around the district, around the country, and how they keep getting smaller and smaller, and we have ghost towns, and there are places that are absolutely suitable to live and build cities, build economies back up. We have the space, and on a global stage, if you have more people, the whole country benefits to a point.
Well,
And
yeah,
also, depending on
but
where they
part of
go,
that
you can't have everybody
space.
consolidated in one place. And when you talk about jobs, what you're talking about is right. And also, we have significant leaps in technology that are coming into play. Whether that's automation or AI, uh, but that's always going to be the case. There's always going to be that next thing. But when you have a good solid labor force at all spectrums of the payment scale, that allows the economy to better mitigate sharp changes from quick advances in technology, because
Yeah,
then you can have that farmer that maybe can't afford that big new harvester with all the bells and whistles that can plow or harvest the field by itself with GPS. Maybe they still need a couple people to run normal tractors, or especially some of the things that just can't be automated because of
yeah.
the
Well, I
the
don't think that
the
it's an issue of
fragility of the product.
because I see a lot of men go working in factories and stuff and doing doing a lot of other jobs, and the reason they go there is because the pay is there. So a lot of
Yeah,
men, like people who empty like you know the bathrooms and the people's oh, it's escaping me.
but janitors and stuff like that.
No, the poop guys. They
Oh,
uh
the
septic tanks.
trucks that pump it out. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like the reason there's people doing it is that the money's there, and with the immigration as we have it, and then you talk about dying towns and stuff, but like what's killing these towns isn't so much that like it's not as there's not as much business to being able to have. So I would say income tax, big and a lot of like the business taxes, because if you look at it, our local guys have to pay tax, but then when we get these big businesses come here, they give them like what's that, tax abatement or whatever, where
yeah,
they don't have to pay for so many years, and it's like, well, okay, but that's the government's picking winners and losers now, right? And then even like COVID was a good example. It let the big box stores stay open, and the big fast food places. But then if you were a mom and pop's business, you weren't allowed to operate. Like they closed you down. Like and it's so like I think that there's a lot of other issues that locally, if we solve those, then some of those small towns can grow again, because people we like to build things, but in environments um, that discourage, innovation and creativity. And I'm not talking about like just like artistic creativity. I'm talking about like people who like to who will get together, figure out a way, build a local factory or find something in their town, and then that attracts people to that town. But when you have like most of our manufacturing overseas, and then now there's not that many people in the U.S. that know how to manufacture, so it's like we've created all these other things, and we're like, well, we'll just, in order to make up for that, we'll bring more people who don't share our values. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I'm with the like immigration. It's way too hard to come here, but at the same time, like, and we need to close the border. But there's a lot of other issues for just Americans um, that need to
Oh,
be
yeah, and
fixed.
the economy's number one, and that's immigration is only one piece of that puzzle.
Yeah.
You brought up bigger companies, consolidation, um, and what scares me, especially right now with Iran and all the oil prices, and especially for farmers, are we going to see another huge farming consolidation like we have in the past that wipes out all those family run, generational family run farms?
Well,
Because
to be fair, in the past, they asked for it. Like during what was it, World War II, after World War II, or no, before it was after World War One, and then I think it was under I want to say, was it Roosevelt? No, well, when the farmers, so they had the government got them to grow a bunch of food basically for the war, and then after the war there was just so much left, like they didn't, like it drove prices down, everything, and then the farmers tried to force other farmers to regulate themselves, and then they got the government involved, and then ever since, like even during COVID, we saw them leaving potatoes and stuff to rot in the fields, dumping out milk, um, like
selling the government cheese to be stored in caves.
yeah, like it's
But yeah,
it's
farming as an industry has its own sort of issues. The only reason I'm bringing it up so much is because it is a big part of
oh
the
yeah, I'm
community in
not sorry.
Northeast
I just
Indiana. Uh, but I mean, another example would be Walmart, right? Um, and and the way some of these really big businesses have found ways to depress wages and really focus on their shareholders. And you might say, well, that's what they're supposed to do, right? They're a company. Well, yeah, but if you don't balance that and you only focus on short term and you use the government to help prop that whole system up, that's a problem. If you're only paying minimum wage, but then all those people are having to pull food stamps because they can't afford to feed their family, then it's the government fulfilling what you should have fulfilled by being a good employer and a good uh, business in your community, a community that probably supported you with those tax abatements that you brought up.
well, it's not their community.
Yeah.
That's the issue with Walmart. Like so like because Myers is more local, and they do a lot of more local, like the produce and
Yep.
stuff. But like if you look at like Walmart and all those other big box stores, like they're not as invested in your community as someone else might be. But the government gives them advantages that allows them to operate. And then on top of that, of course, they're bigger, so they have more money. But aside from that,
They can lobby more.
yeah, the regulations that they like, if you look at uh, Meta and the other like I think it's Meta trying to get Linux outlawed,
Yeah,
which
I heard
that's
about that.
crazy. Linux is like, because it's free and there's so many different like things you can do with Linux, and and they can't track as much, and so Meta, of course, wants to wipe out its competitor and only have you on things that they can collect data on and sell your information and stuff. That it's bigger money for them, and like I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure
yeah,
that
we need to fight against crony capitalism. We need to fight against graft. We need to fight against rent seeking. All these things that these companies do. But we're gonna, and I'll be there in Congress doing what I can. But I think I'm hopeful this next election cycle maybe we see somebody step up that has more of and I didn't agree with him on everything for sure, but more of a Teddy Roosevelt style, trying to go in and bust up those trusts and those monopolies and really fight against it. I think we need somebody that has that kind of passion, but things have gotten so complex in this world. I'm just not sure if the mainstream is following along with that. And also the bigger thing when you talk about lobbying, we have the military industrial complex, right?
Yeah.
I firmly believe that we have, an election media complex or a political campaign media complex that all feeds off of each other and keeps these things going.
Yeah,
And
the propaganda, both sides,
yep,
the propaganda they spew out is.
sometimes they pay for each other.
Yeah.
We were talked about Citizens United earlier. I just heard that there's been several cases where conservatives have been sending resources to help get corruption charges overturned for Democrats because they don't want they don't want the money issue being tackled.
Yeah.
They don't want people looking at that. And so even if it's somebody on the other side that got a bribe, they'll fight for them
Because it's the
instead of
same
the
team.
American people. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's fact. That's why, like, when Republicans get in, you can never get anything overturned. That the Democrat, if you do, it's only like parts, but then it's parts that are, in the future would be just as easy to return, and it's like we're constantly being pushed down the same path by both parties. And the founders warned us about this. They say that factions and how they use them, how well, there's different, but like how ours are used is how they say that they make the other person out to be the enemy, and then so while you're fighting each other, you're too busy to see the corruption of your own side, right? And you support your loyalty to your side at all cost. Like it's, and then like yeah, this the last probably like since before Trump's first term to now, like Trump, then Biden, and then Trump. Like it's been made very clear to me. I've argued with both sides consistently on the same issues now, and all it does is like when one party's doing it, the other party's like, oh, that's evil, and then once it's your party doing it, then they're like, oh, it's it's constitutional. Like you could do that, like war, like oh yeah, the War Powers Act. But then those same people, when it was Biden, were like, oh, we can't go to war. Like this is unconstitutional. And it's like I'm tired of, I don't know, like this is sheep. It's like you're stuck between. That's why there can never be any more liberty. Like, and that's I understand why the founders talk about how like once it's lost, it's almost impossible to regain.
And even back then, they had issues with it. I mean, George Washington's farewell address, I think, lays out what you're talking about best, talking about how the factions will produce negative consequences for the country, but also allow more foreign entanglement when you have these factions and things like that. And I think it's very prophetic.
Yeah.
But even himself, he was part of a party system while he served.
Yeah,
and he tried to warn us after the fact. So even back then, it was hard to work around.
Less so. I mean, because like Jefferson, when he was going to get elected, and I think it was like a tie or something or whatever, they had a standstill, and Hamilton, sorry, not James, Hamilton, even though he didn't really like like they didn't agree on things, he was like, that's a better option than, I forget what the other guy was. And he was like, he tried to get people to support Jefferson over the other guy. And it's like, see, even like one of the most, like I call Hamilton a traitor because he's a flip flopper. He says what he needs to say. He's a good politician, you should say. But if even the biggest government guy, and can like swallow his pride and be like, what's best for the country would be Jefferson, even though they don't really get along. And then when Jefferson gave his, I think it's his inaugural speech, he talked about, that's one of the things he talked about. Like, even though we have different, align with different groups or whatever, at the end of the day, like, we're all Americans, and we should focus on, like, there's things that we can agree on and move for the best of the country. And it's like, man, like, they don't. So, like, yeah, they had
Yeah.
those. James Webb, when he writes about, he has the French Revolution, talks about factions. There's a part in there. Uh, Washington. I know Jefferson does. Oh, there's a few others too. Like, there's a lot of founders. Like, when I say the founders, I often talk about, like, a lot of people that nobody actually read, because there's more founders than just. But I also like the Anti-Federalists as well. They were prophetic. But yeah, like, the just the being stuck between two groups of morons. Like,
The rhetoric doesn't help. I mean, I'm so sick of hearing that, you know, my next door neighbor who's a Democrat is the devil. Like, yeah, there's a
yeah,
lot of stuff I don't agree with him on, but he's a functioning member of society that contributes, and we have our disagreements on some things, and we'll never come together on them. But on the other stuff, why can't we talk about that and move forward
yeah,
on that? And I was thankful that, especially Senator Coates, but Senator Braun too, like all those bills I mentioned earlier, the veterans bills and stuff, they all had a co-sponsor, an original co-sponsor from the Democrat side. One was Kirsten Gillibrand. We even did one with Bernie Sanders. You think, as a conservative, fiscal responsible conservative, I agree with much that Bernie Sanders says? Obviously not.
yeah,
But on that one little sliver, where we were talking about veterans or the debt, we did. And we were
yeah,
able to work on that and get some stuff done. And, casting everything off, every compromise off is terrible, is what got us here. At some point, that's why we still haven't funded DHS. We can never pass a budget for some reason. Because it's so built up in the media, and the loudest voices drive the primary system in the parties, and then when you get there, you get attacked if you're pragmatic at all.
yeah. And that's what I mean. Like, when I say the morons, is the ones that are so dug in that you can't. Like, there's people that call me, so they're like, "Oh, you're leftist," and I'm actually like, there've been times when I've quoted the founders, and they're like, "Oh, you're just a leftist," and I'm like, "Wait, what?" Like, I'm quoting George Washington, and then they're, what I mean, like, on like, for instance, war powers or whatever. If I quote, I'll say, like, "Oh, they did, they put the power in Congress, because that's one of the main difference between a king and the executive. The king can start wars, but they decided that they didn't want it, like, someone who had the powers like a king. So they took that power and put it in Congress and not the executive. So, like, and then if you just mention the word king because of the no king protests or whatever, they're like, "Oh, you're one of those no king protesters." Like, no, I'm literally quoting the fathers. Like, this is what they said. This is the reasoning they gave behind it. And they'll be like, "Oh," and then people be like, "Well, he didn't, like, someone didn't pay attention in uh what's that, the class in school for politics,
Oh, government class?
like,
You
yeah."
mean in like high school? Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, "He didn't pay attention." I'm like, "Well, no, I didn't. Of course, I didn't pay attention in government school. Like, I got my educate. Like, I actually go read the actual documents, because everything that like, every time someone makes a claim, and I, like, they'll show me something, I'll read it, and I'm like, "Well, wait, well, like, what about the sources?" And then I go and start looking at the sources, and I'm like, man, like
Oh,
that.
oh yeah, and especially nowadays with social media and all the stuff that pops up and all the claims and different quotes, and I mean, even some in the administration making up Bible verses for prayers now. Like, where are we? What
Yeah,
kind of world is this?
yeah. It's the kind of the same. It's the same thing. Like, I had the same experience with church as well. Like, and I use church in, like, a general sense, not like a specific church or something like that. But, like, when it comes to, like, looking at, like, reading the Bible and then seeing what it's like, when I, oh, like everyone else, like I was raised on like Paul and how like the lens. Um, I mean, a lot of the Christian church, that's the main lens that they look through, even above Jesus, which is kind of weird to me. But but when I went back and read Jesus, and then I started looking into how like where he was referencing from, like in the Old Testament, which is Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and then reading what he says in the New Testament, and then seeing that like some of the places where they say that he's going against the law or whatever, he's not actually going against the law. He's actually correcting the rabbis and Pharisees and pointing to the law and saying this is what the Torah says, but you're telling people to do this, and they have no obligation to do it. And one of the main principles in the Torah is you shall not add to or take away from, right? And so they were making. That's why he says that you add burdens onto these people that they can't keep. Um, but like yeah, just it started with for me. It started with the church and actually reading my Bible and then looking and being like, oh wait, like yeah. And then it was like, well, politics too. And then I learned like if someone tells you to, they'll be like, oh, well, go read the War Powers Resolution is what gives them this. And then like I go read the War Power Resolution, and then I read it and like something just doesn't like seem right here, you know. And you're like, well, what did the founders say? You know what I mean? Like, what did the early Supreme Court justices say? And uh, it's not what most people think it is.
100%. And don't just listen to the media and don't listen to the other side. Don't even listen directly to me. Like when all the stuff I talked about Marlon earlier, go check out his congress.gov site, the government site that has the official documents, the official text of any bill that he introduced, what his votes were. It's all there.
Yep.
Because and there are some organizations that do a good job of pulling data together and sort of showing you trends, but you can't always be faithful that they're going to have your best interest in mind, because somebody has to pay for those organizations, whether it's Cato or Heritage or the Wilson Institute. And I just hit three sides of the spectrum, so don't say I'm picking favorites or picking on any of them. Okay.
Yeah.
They all have their own agenda, because they all have donors that gave to them to let them do what they do and have the experts they have. And while they can be useful, you have to be balanced in what you take in, and you still have to go back and look at the actual text to see what's going to happen. But that's a lot of work, right? It's a ton of work. And I don't know how we overcome that information gap to get the word out better. And I hope that, doing stuff like this and podcasts and having some deeper dives will make people wake up and start looking into that. But that's a heavy load to try and carry.
It is. I mean, are you okay on time, or how much?
I got about 5 minutes left.
Okay. Like one of the things that I always like, so it's like we're late in the game, but like what really needs to happen is that like schools, like our school system needs to teach, I'm not talking about they need to teach like Republican or Democrat, but it needs to teach like how the system actually, like, so like when you go to Congress, what the process is, or like locally too, like your local legislation, how it's supposed to work, the rules, and like and then just all the way around, from like your city council to county council to like you should understand your whole your political system so that you know how to affect it, and it's better responds to like the actual citizens. And I get pushed back on that. They're like, oh, you shouldn't like involve politics in school. I think one guy was like, no, that's not how you do it. You learn poetry or whatever, and then this or that. I'm like, no, that's like, what are you talking about? Like,
it doesn't have to be political. It can just be about governance.
Yeah.
And it's not focused on enough. I mean, how many people really know the difference between what a commissioner, a councilman, an auditor, a recorder, what each of those positions does?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which side they're on, but what are they supposed to do if they have that job?
Yep.
The assessor, go down the list. And I think you're right. There's really not any focus on it almost at the local level. There's maybe a tiny bit at the state level when you learn about Indiana history. I think in fourth grade, I went down to the state house. I think most schools still do that at some point.
Yeah.
And you might take an eighth grade trip to Washington, but it's really not enough. And some of these things are pretty complex. So I think maybe they should be held off till like junior, senior year of high school, and maybe intertwined with, you know, things like economics. And I don't mean large scale, I mean personal economics, like how do I pay my bills? What does interest rate on a house mean?
Yeah.
Okay, well, how does that tie in with what the government's doing? Should I be worried? How can I be educated when I think about these things and how they're going to impact me? And I think there's a disconnect in how we teach that, if it's taught at all.
How to invest? Like, how does the stock market work? How to invest? Like, just basic. Like, when was the last time that you've seen anyone talk when like a cop or something pulls like? Did they actually reference the Indiana Constitution and not just the federal Constitution? Because we have two constitutions, both of which have provisions for for our protection. And it's like, because most people don't know we even have an Indiana Constitution, or have ever read it. And that's your state constitution. You should know your state constitution just as well as the federal Constitution, and most people know neither. So it's a real problem. So trying to start, that's one of the main places that you start to change things is at the educational level, and then, it's. There's a lot,
and not just Constitution, but state law versus federal law. I mean, everybody people have been starting to get more aware of that, especially with the marijuana debate, and some states legalizing, but it's still illegal at federal level, even though they just changed classification and all that. But it goes far beyond that. A lot of stuff with the Second Amendment is duplicated. So maybe they. We get the right administration and the ATF makes some changes, but it's still legal here in Indiana, even if the ATF isn't going after you, because they've duplicated those laws. Or there's also been a new thing with home distilling. There was a recent court decision that allowed it, but in Indiana, for example, it's still a misdemeanor to own distilling equipment for alcohol, even though it looks like the appeals court has overturned.
It's supposed to, though. Like, that's how it's. Yeah. Like, the states are supposed to have within. So, like, I'm not saying that the states, because I don't, like, when it comes to home distilling, you should, like, that's, if you're just at your house, who cares? Like, just like if you print guns, I don't care. Like, you know what I mean? Because most people that are doing it aren't, like, 99% of people aren't out there trying to shoot people. You know what I mean? Like, most people do it because it's fun, and it's, like, it's, it's privacy. You don't have, like, you're not on some list in the federal, because they do record that stuff. But
and they still have the list for silencers. Don't forget that if you're out there.
Yeah.
You might not have to pay the fee anymore, but you're still on a list.
They know where to go if they want to get them. And that's the issue. But, like, states themselves. So, like, all right. So, the thing that, like, when it comes to the Second Amendment, it clearly states that the federal government has no authority to regulate those firearms, right? And you can argue about some little stuff maybe, but overall it does not. So a state has the right to, there are bills out there that you pass, and you can say that, like, in Indiana you can own all these things without a tax stamp. Like, the federal government can't enforce it because it's not within their constitution. Like, and that's what when you go back and you read the founders, they like Jefferson especially, he talks about how the Supreme Court is not the end-all be-all, and they were never supposed to have that much power. They're not supposed to be the sole deciders of what's constitutional. That all of the branches within their spheres of power can decide whether what is constitutional or not. But then he kind of says that, like, Congress in the states or should, if anyone's going to be the sole arbiter, or at the final say, it should be the people of the states that decide that thing, and that states at the end of the day are the ones, if ever the federal government has overreach, or even when it comes to war, Madison was talking about that it's the state's job to rein that in and to push back against that. So, but you're right. There's some things that like it should be uh, like legal, and even on the federal, it's no longer banned. But again, that's up to us. If we really wanted, that stuff legalized, like we could overnight, you know, all, like phone calls for like a week from everybody, and I guarantee you, when they realize their job is on the line, that you're gonna have whatever you want by the end of the.
And
But yeah,
until you have a distributor write them a big campaign check.
yeah. Exactly. Is there anything you would like to finish with, or?
No, I appreciate you having me on. If anybody's interested in learning more, please look me up on Facebook, Jon Kenworthy for Congress, or you can go to my website if you just want some more general information, just kenworthyforcongress.com. And again, I'm an open book. I'm trying to be as transparent as possible and give people an alternative. So, thanks again.
Yep. Would you be willing to come on in the future for, like, I don't know, stuff happens, and as stuff happens, like I like to have different people come on and talk about it, especially Indiana stuff. There's actually people don't realize there's actually quite a bit that happens in Indiana, legislative wise, that is pretty important, and on the federal level too, as well. Like that affects us specifically. So
No, I'd be happy to come on again. Probably not before the election, but either way things turn out, happy to come on after the election.
yeah.
And anytime there's something you think I might have a voice that could be helpful or enlightening, happy to do it.
All right. Like, yep. You're in good company because Mike Felker comes on as well, and he talks like that guy when it comes to like state legislation and stuff. Like he's on it. Like he's switched on. So, um, but yeah, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Like, of course, we talked more than this, but yeah, yeah. But I hope you win. I really do. I hope you win. Um, but yeah, well, I guess have a good night.
Sounds good, sir.
Yeah.
See you later.
See you later. Take it easy.